their bands.
Yeah.
The favorite. So far, this has been my favorite. Yes, it is. Thank you, Madam Clerk. And this is the City Council workshop for the City of Bonney Lake, dated May 3rd, 2022. And as we started at the last workshop, and Madam Clerk is very astute on putting it onto the agenda, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everybody. And I believe we are going to start with who I haven't seen in a couple, 3 months, but our chief, or the East Pierce Fire Chief.
Mr. Mayor, we have to do roll call.
Oh, we do. I am sorry. I've been wanting to hear from John for a long time. Let's do the roll call first.
Mayor McCullough.
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Carter.
Here.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Here.
Councilmember Evans.
Here.
Councilmember Fullerton.
Here.
Councilmember McClyman.
Here.
Councilmember Swatman.
Present.
And Councilmember Watson.
Here. Okay, Chief Parkinson, would you like to invite us?
Yes, sir. Is my mic on already? Good, thank you. Thank God.
You will need to be pretty close to it.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Council, for having me here tonight. I just wanted to take a little time to tell you where East Pierce has been, where we are now, where we're headed, and then see if there's any questions that I can answer for you tonight. And so, got a couple of handouts for you, annual report, strategic plan, but flipping over to the first screen before I go too far here, talking about past and changes that we've had in command staff. So some of the faces on here you may or may not recognize, but so that's the command staff of East Pierce Fire and Rescue. So that's fire chief through battalion chiefs. We got crazy mouse going on.
I got it. Okay, now we're done. Sorry.
All right, try this again. So as far as command staff goes, over the last couple of years, we've had quite a bit of change out. So just the folks on the screen, and I realize that you probably don't know most of them, but if you knew the people that filled those spots before, half of them would be different over the last couple of years. Myself, I was sworn in as fire chief in May of last year as a backer retired. In the photo there to the right of me or to the left of me, depending on the way you're facing, our new deputy, Bill Mack. He came to us after 30 years with Valley Regional Fire Authority in Auburn. The next couple folks that you see on screen there, both Kevin Stavenfeld and Jeff Moore, are new assistant chief. And then on the bottom row are 5 battalion chiefs. 3 of those folks are new in the last couple of years. So overall, the majority of command staff has swapped out over the last. Some of that is just timing of where they were in their career, and then just changes with the pandemic and everything else made people want to say that it was time to move on. So anyway, so great team, but that's the new faces of command staff. Most of those folks are going to. So little overview of East Pierce Fire and Rescue, recognizing that everybody knows the name, but I always like to take a chance to talk about who we are, where we cover all. Service area, so outside of Bonney Lake, we cover the cities of Milton, Edgewood, Sumner, Town of South Prairie through contract, all the unincorporated areas east of Bonney Lake, so all the way around Lake Taps, Prairie Ridge to Holly. I'm sure you're all very familiar with that community. Like I said, out to South Prairie, all the way up to Buckley. City of Buckley is its own fire department in that area, but then headed out towards the National Park, all the way around Wilkeson, Carbonado, through Fairfax, and out to the Mowich entrance to the National Park. So 153 square miles, just over 100,000 folks live in that area. Good sized service area that's covered by 6 staff fire stations. Staff size, so currently we have 163 FTEs, so full-time employees, and Outside of that, we have 7 volunteers. 2 of those are chaplains. 5 of them are either volunteer firefighters or volunteer EMS. And then as far as governance goes, sorry, let me step back here into call volume. So those folks, like I said, respond out of 6 fire stations and handle roughly 12,000 plus calls per year. We typically send around 2.5 units on every emergency. So that means rolling stock that's going down the road is going out the door somewhere between 25,000 to 30,000 times per year that we have a unit rolling out. So pretty busy department as far as governance, just like you, we have an elected board. So we have 7 fire commissioners. They serve terms. They're in charge of both policy and setting budget for the district, and then I'm in charge with that, just like your city administrator. So as far as funding goes, we're primarily funded through property taxes. So 85% of our funding comes from property taxes. Of that 85%, it's split. 3/4 of it comes through what we call our fire levy or the regular levy. The other quarter comes through an EMS. So 85% of funding comes there. What's left over primarily comes through medical transport fees. So fees that we charge for taking medical patients to the hospital. For district residents, our residents never receive a bill. We do bill insurance, but then anything that's not covered by insurance or by Medicare, Medicaid ends up getting written off against the EMS levy. Folks that do not reside within the district do get balance billed for that. So that's primarily what makes up 99% of the budget, those 2 taxes and then EMS revenues, transport. So in front of you, a couple documents. The first one that I'll speak to here is annual report. So I'm just going to talk about a few key items that were accomplished in 2021. So the first one on the list there is changes in staffing. So over the last 5 years, the board has made a concerted effort to improve staffing levels throughout the district. When I arrived here, our minimum staffing level was 21 personnel each day, and prior to my arrival, it was lower than that. So what that meant was that on a fire engine or a ladder truck, you would typically have 2 people staffing that unit. That's either safe for the personnel or for the community. So over the last 5 years, through keeping up with attrition and doing additional overhiring, as of July last year, we finally achieved what we consider our minimum safe staffing level. So that has 3 personnel on all fire engines and ladder trucks. So 5 fire engines, 1 ladder truck, 4 medic units. So now our minimum staffing is 27 personnel each day, 24/7. In addition to those, the companies that I spoke about, so 5 engine companies, 1 ladder truck, 4 medic units, have a battalion advisory. Next item on there is budget adoption. We run a single-year budget, and besides just kind of the normal happenings within a budget, I'll talk about a couple positions which were added here in a few minutes. But of note to Bonney Lake, we did purchase a new fire boat. So if you're familiar with the pontoon boat that we've had out on the lake for some, usually kind of leaning to one side, but they're actually doing sea trials of it this week, and hopefully we'll have it down here in the next couple weeks to start doing on. Hopefully you'll see that out here this summer. We do have to do some retrofits to the station that it sits in, so that will maybe be a little interesting in how we deploy it this year. But so that's an exciting piece of equipment to add to the community. As far as budget goes, proud to report that a couple things. Number one is our overall operating expenditure increase. The resulting tax revenue increase of that was a 1.17 revenue increase that the homeowners would feel. So to the average homeowner across East Pierce Fire and Rescue, they saw a $15 per year increase. Doing the math on that as far as what their tax increase was. So good to see that we kept our costs contained. Next item on the list there is strategic plan. So that's the other document that I handed out to you. So one of the first things that I wanted to accomplish was putting together a strategic plan. So we began this last spring. It had been a little over a decade since the organization had a strategic plan. So what was adopted this fall is the document that's in front of you, which is our 5-year strategic plan, 2021 through 2025. And I'm not going to spend any time going through it. It's good bedtime reading if you're interested. But I'll just hit on what the 4 strategic goals. Number 1 is employee base, focusing on employees, our number 1 asset. Second one is focusing on community growth and strategies to address as the communities or continue to see increased population and call volume. Number 3 on there is community relations and strengthening our relationships within the community. Especially due to the pandemic, we had to retract from a lot of activities that we would normally do, if that's open houses, engaging with schools, etc. Our main source of contact with the public was through social media, so concerted effort to get back out in the public now. And then last strategic goal focuses on organizational efficiency, and that's both internal policy and practices as well as fiscal responsibility. So 4 key strategic goals there. And then last item that saw of note that I'll comment on is just on facilities and equipment. So as far as bond projects go, fire stations, so the rendering that you have up in front of you is from Station 118, that's the Edgewood Station. So that's our first station to go into construction. So we had an $80 million bond, which primarily paid for or will be paid for 5 fire stations that I'll hit on here in a second. So the Station 118 project is about halfway through, and we expect it to be open later this fall. A couple words that I hate saying. One is COVID, and the other one is supply chain. It's 2 words, but anyway, that project, just like all of the other things that you guys are doing, doesn't seem like you can breath without hitting some barrier that's caused by one of those issues. So that station had, it's 2 steps forward and a step back, and making good headway right now, just to find out that steel has become very hard to come by because of a war over Ukraine. So the 80-foot span that goes across the apparatus bay where the vehicles park, we're having a hard time getting our hands on that. So that set back that project. Next up in the queue after that, hopefully will be Station 111 here in Bonney Lake. We expect to be out to bid hopefully this month, breaking ground during the summer. Next 2 stations, which will basically break ground around the same time. One is out in Holly, so that's Station 117. That's a new facility, not a replacement. And then at the northwest corner of Lake Taps, our Lake Taps Fire Stations, 14, break ground later this fall. We expect as we wrap up 2022 that we'll have 4 stations in production. Then our last facility is the Prairie Ridge Fire Station, that's Station 112. We expect that to break ground in mid-20. Finally making some headway on those after a couple of years. So, and then next item, so I mentioned the bond, so it paid $73 million of that roughly goes towards fire stations. The remainder of the $80 million equipment. So it bought 1 ladder truck, so this is on the road now. It's based out of our Sumner Fire Station 113. Recognize that as a picture from the south end of Lake Taps. And then 6 fire engines, so this is Station 111's fire engine here in Bonney Lake. Very exciting to have new equipment. Most of our rolling stock was in rough shape, just funding issues through the recession. The reliability of the equipment had become very poor. Ladder truck that you saw in the previous picture, its predecessor spent more time out of service than it did in. So that's kind of the present, and then where we're headed throughout the remainder of 2022 and over the next few years. So a couple items that have changed. I mentioned in the budget that we added a couple positions. So the first one, and it actually just filled in April, is a behavioral health specialist. So currently, the last few years, we've had a position titled the Community Resource Paramedic. It's staffed by one of our paramedics, Jen Killian. Her focus is on low acuity chronic users of the 911 system. So sometimes referred to as 911 abusers. And so working with strategies to help those folks find resources other than utilizing 911 to call for social work. And so we added a second body into that division. This one is a non-uniformed civilian worker titled behavioral health specialist, and so she's going to be teamed up with Jen, focusing on a lot of the same work. This person will pick up most of the case management, allows Jen to further step into the field, and what we're hoping is be able to put more of a focus into senior housing facilities. Both of these people, if you follow kind of the news with behavioral health and you see the policing aspect of impacts of behavioral health, our goal is to capture those people not in an emergent setting. These folks that we have doing this work aren't trained to handle crisis mode. That's when we do have to lean on law enforcement. So we're hoping to engage these folks when they're not in crisis. Next position on there, I mentioned that currently each shift has a battalion chief, which is the advisor for the shift. Roughly 75% of our incidents each year are medical nature. So the MSO, or medical services officer, is a new position which provides medical oversight 24/7, 365. So that position will be staffed later this fall. And like I said, be staffed 24/7, 365. So that will bring our staffing level up to a minimum of 80 each. Selling bonds, so I mentioned the $80 million bond, which was approved by voters in 2018. The first half of those bonds, $40 million, was sold in 2019. The next half is going to be sold this year. Originally, we were targeting this fall, but trying to capture bond rates before they start to climb up too high. They're still historically low. So a couple advantages of selling right now is, number one, we can still capture some low rates. We're also able to, because of those low rates, shorten the repayment term. The first half of bonds was sold for a 20-year repayment. The second half is going to be sold at a 16-year schedule. So that will actually sync up those two sets of bonds so they'll expire at the same time. By capturing low rates and shortening the term, the projection is that will save taxpayers roughly $8.5 million. Benefit to Bonney Lake citizens as well as the rest of the citizens district. SAFER grant, we have applied for a federal grant to assist with staffing and hiring new firefighters. It's targeted towards bringing on firefighters for the station out in Tahali. We'll find out this summer if we're fortunate enough to be granted that. It would be for 12 entry-level firefighters for 3 years. It's 100% funded, no local match. That's just north of $5.5 million. If we don't get it, we're still just status quo as far as how we're hiring, but one less thing that taxpayers have to bear the full burden of. Other items on there, Station 118, that's the Edgewood station. Like I said, we expect to see that open later in 2022. We expect to be out on the ballot in April of 2023 for the fire levy. In 2021, we ran the EMS levy and fire levy in primary. EMS levy passed and was renewed for a 10-year period. Fire levy failed. We put it back out. The general failed again. At that time, it was a multi-year, 4-year lid lift. So what we're going to be going back out for in April of 23 is then, like I mentioned, on the next couple stations, Station 117, that's the Tahali station. We expect to see it in staff later in 2023. And then Station 124, which is our Milton Fire Station. There's an existing station there. We just don't have it staffed. So hoping to get it staffed later in 2024. And, I'll call out a couple things here. While you hear, areas like Tahali or Milton don't seem that important, talking about Bonney Lake. As we make improvements anywhere in our system, because we're a regional system, if we can add staffing anywhere, it increases reliability here. So reliability meaning the amount of times that you call 911 that your closest fire station comes, that's what we want to happen. As staffing is lean, that's less likely to happen. You're more likely to have to draw from a station that's further away. As we add staffing into Milton, that means a crew from Edgewood doesn't have to go to Milton. Now that means a crew from Sumner doesn't have to go to Edgewood, and a crew from Bonney Lake doesn't have to go to Sumner, and so on and so on. So all of those will improve the entire system reliability. So even adding staffing into Milton or Tahali does improve service levels. That is all that I have. There are additional stats in the annual report that talk about local call volume. Happy to answer any additional questions. I'll just close by saying, I was with City of Sumner last night, and I've worked with East Pierce Fire and Rescue now for 3.5 years, and like I said, we serve those 4 cities. I'm immensely pleased by the relationship that we have with all 4 cities, and in Bonney Lake as a part of that too, with council and with city administrator and police. So thank you for inviting me, and again, if there's anything I can answer, happy to.
All right, we open the floor to any questions, discussion. Councilmember Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got 2 questions. Station on 214.
Yes.
Can you please, open and close that when you.
So that's station 112. That's the Prairie Ridge station. It is going to be moving. It's not going to be rebuilt on site unless plans fall apart. But that's a backup plan to tear down and build on site. But we'd like to get it closer towards the Tahali development. So.
And there's been a lot of issues about mental health. Are you on call for a police department? They have an issue when they're going on a call like that? Or you have follow up with that with your behavioral health specialist? They do anything with that at all?
So if it's a police matter, they're going to use co-responders, which are provided typically by the county. Chief Jeter can speak a lot more intelligently to that subject. So like I said, no, in crisis setting, that is not what our folks are trained to do. But what happens is when our folks see that person, they get flagged in our system so that in the following days or weeks, our team ends up following up with that person. If they're still at home, then they can start making connections with that person and get them to the right resources.
I have an app that tells where you guys are going all the time.
Yep.
It's amazing how many vehicles you're going to different things. There's one out just outside the city there, like 5 vehicles from all different directions. So you guys are busy all the time. Wish all your staff does it. They're very busy out there.
I do have a question, follow up to Councilmember Watson on the behavioral health specialist that you are bringing in. I believe you answered this, but I still want to make it a little clearer on this. The new behavioral health specialist is not a designated crisis responder.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And we had a situation where the DCR would have to come out to take somebody over to one of the hospitals, and everything would still have to count.
Correct.
Go.
Yeah. Our person does not have the ability to do an involuntary commitment.
Right. Any further questions from either the council or our panel of judges? All right. Oh, a couple other questions having to do with the prospect of our new station that's over here. You're saying we're going to bring around during the summertime. Is that how definite is that? We're looking at only a couple, 3 months.
It's a soft definite.
Okay.
So we're waiting on our last couple items back from the city. And I think we have our answer back that we need as far as civil. We have all of our docs ready to go. It's a more complicated building than our other, just double the size. I mean, houses all, 1,000 square feet. It's had some other, we've dealt with some other challenges.
But beyond that, I'm still concerned about supply chains and everything.
Yeah.
Send you as an
Yeah.
stopping this thing
Okay.
so we can get some steel. Oh, okay. All right. Well, if anybody has no further questions, we will move on. Now we're going to start with a council open discussion. And so this is Councilmember Watson. We'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As the council probably saw, Saturday I sent out some pictures from our Park Appreciation Day. It's really too bad there wasn't anyone else out there but myself and the council to see what was going on. And a nice turnout. DN Disposal was out there with their shutter truck, and we have Serve Pro who did a great job. They probably had over half dozen associates out there helping out too. As I walked through the park and picked up trash, there's quite a bit of trash. The undergrowth, Mr. Mayor, is getting back. We cleaned it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I'd like to think about in the future in the new budget, maybe get that clean again. The other concern I have, if I could show someone else too, is the little mountain knoll behind the medical center.
Yeah.
There are homeless people up there now. There's some camps up there. Took back a lot of trash and more trash to be up there. It'd be nice if we could sooner than later get that cleaned out like we did the other part of it, so at least we'll have it all uniformed up there.
Oh,
So that's a real
absolutely.
concern I have. That taken care of and how people are when they're doing shopping. They were all there. The other thing is communication out to our citizens, what's going on. We have a location at the top of the hill we put in on 410 Vegetable Drive that is all wired for a reader board. We didn't pass it a couple of years ago, 3-4 years ago, because it was a little bit required, a large one we had planned on for the budget, so we took it off the budget. But I would like to have you again consider that for your new budget moving forward. I think things going on, that we're needing help someplace, something's going on, park appreciation, do it by Bonney Lake. It'd be very useful. We used to have the portable reader boards, which aren't being used any longer. That'd be an ideal spot for us to do some of that.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Councilmember Watson. Do we have any further? Oh, Councilmember Evans.
I just wanted to take ask staff, this is a code question, 18.22.060, raising and grazing of livestock and poultry. C and D are talking specifically about chickens no closer than 45 feet from dwellings on adjacent lots. That number is picked specifically. With all the small houses we've got in here, small lots, where urban farming is being really limited, and I know a lot of people are trying to get back to being a little more one with nature, and these communities, that doesn't allow for something like that. So
I'm looking at the code.
Oh, my question is, who's going to tell the chickens?
they don't know 45.
They don't know 45 feet.
Councilmember Evans, I don't have any background on how that 45.
Oh my God, yes. Oh,
Because it allows for no more than 3 chickens on a residential lot less than 1 acre. However, it can't be within 45, or there can't be another enclosure within 45 feet of that in an adjacent lot.
what I can say is, if this is something the council wants us to look at, we are doing the 2022 Development Code Adoption Amendment, so if it's nods of heads or something, we can add that to the list of things that would go in there, and we can bring you back a new number and see what that appropriate number would be.
Well, and a serious question follow up to that, Mr. Relvin, is would our respective new code enforcement officer be?
On the structure, yes.
Okay.
So we would look at the structure, but if it had to deal with the chickens themselves, that would go to Metro Animal Service, who does all the animal. We would look at if the pen is too close to the property line,
Right.
any of the issues with the animals themselves would be,
Or if the homeowner just lets their chickens roam free
That would be
outside.
animal control.
Okay,
But that's free range.
that is free.
You have a problem with
More
roosters once.
expensive eggs.
You do have a problem with roosters once in a while too.
And the code specifically says no rooster. Code of things. Yeah.
Wait, no.
we the council.
You're probably 12 feet in some, depending on point to point of the
Yeah.
of the structures.
And I'll say the closest depends on how well maintained one's probably not a big deal.
Yeah.
Not well maintained, probably a big.
Okay, enough of
We'll
this-
look into it.
Enough of this hard hitting stuff.
Oh, hey, Councilmember Baldwin, are you, I just.
Yeah, so I wanted to, about that, and so if there's a way that we can revisit that, that would be great. Unless there's another idea for mass communication with the public, then that would be great. The other thing I wanted to follow up on a couple, since we're on code, I wanted to follow up on some things. I did want to know more about the assembly use code, and I wasn't sure when we were going to be discussing that again. I did look at that. Is it in there?
Yeah, we got it.
Yeah, I believe
Oh,
so.
assembly in Midtown, is that what that was? All right, the other thing is, Councilmember Evans had mentioned it was the small business code. I feel like you mentioned that last.
Yes. The projected agenda, that's.
Okay, excellent. Okay. And then last but not least, I just want to let you guys know I was able to attend the car drill, and that was really interesting to watch. All of the effort that went into the emergency planning, really excellent job. I asked them just questions about, okay, well, what if there are different instances? Obviously, there's all kinds of different situations that can happen with the mountain, and just the need for the person that we have in that position right now, remind me, Ray.
Yeah, Rachel.
There you go. That in order for us to accomplish having more plans put in place, especially just different things we would do in the event of an emergency, that she would be the one that would be helping plan that. So just something for the council to consider as far as, because I think her position is currently temporary, is that correct?
Limited term through December of
Oh, gotcha. Okay, yeah. So just something to consider. There's definitely lots of different things that can happen with that mountain, other than just a lahar. So, yeah.
Yeah, I saw some other hands. Councilmember requirements.
Yeah, regarding the upcoming, thought that, looking at that, I thought the two topics that were of interest to me, that I thought would be good to get prepared for would be solving the boat trailer parking and addressing sewer and water rates for the citizens, right? So we can come up with a concrete answer and plan. I get consistent emails about, is the city doing something? I want to see progress. And I think it would be good that out of that meeting that we come up with a way to communicate to the citizens, right, about these rates in a reasonable way so that they can understand the issues and the plans and how things.
Oh, absolutely. I can say too, the first issue is that Councilmember Swatman didn't share an email thread that he had with citizens today who actually proposed leaning on the school district to allow us to use Emerald Hills parking lot as perhaps an overflow. So I did contact Superintendent Dent and the Deputy Superintendent. And right before I came down here, the superintendent did send me a response email. Haven't checked it yet because I was on my way down here. But I will let you know if that's even a possibility that we can, that good parking lot is some sort of overflow. Deputy Mayor Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to address a couple of things that Councilmember Clemens brought up. Number one being the boat trailer parking issue. I guess if we've dealt with if it's going to be open or closed or whatnot, and it wasn't put onto the street agenda. But we could look at doing something with that. The other thing was the water rate deal, and we're waiting for a rate survey and whatnot to come back. We really can't do anything until that comes back, so that's the reason that's not necessary. So that will come up in the future as soon as that comes up. But we're just talking to talk and then not being able to do anything. Didn't feel like it was really.
Do we have a prospective date on the surveys coming in? Might be. Oh. Ms. Ryerson, did you enlighten us, please?
Yeah, so I recently spoke with our representative from FCS, Mr. Gonzalez, and he has started their kickoff meeting. He received all the documents he needs from the city last week or the week before, so they've just now started this. We can expect to hear back from them in a few months, so probably 3 or 4 months for them to start working on this before they come back to council.
Oh, right. Do we have? Councilmember Baldwin.
Is there a possibility that, I'm assuming 3 to 4 months, and then maybe there's even more considerations after that, I'm guessing more than past the 4-month mark. Is there a way for us to temporarily adopt what Councilmember Evans had mentioned prior to in regards to just changing the tier system? Because I think we're getting ready to hit the summer months where people are definitely going to get some painful bills.
What would that
So
be?
the council, they put a freeze on the rate for 2022. We're in 2022. I always forget. Working in finance, I'm always either in the year before or the year next, so hardly ever in the current year. So you guys froze the rates for 2022. So you're right. Summer rates will be in effect here shortly. I wouldn't recommend making any changes. Any changes at this point would cause more work for FCS to study.
Yeah, they're already studying this particular model, and if we go and change that model by doing that, then that.
Effective 15th.
Yeah. And just so you know, Councilmember Paul, that vote, the freeze happened like the week before you actually took office.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was on the increases, the projected increases, right? Yeah, because there was some programmed increases that were supposed to be this year. Council froze until we got through the rate study. Do we know the full agenda for the council retreat? All items, I guess.
It was, yeah, we do. Was it sent out? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know if there would be, I would support Councilmember McClellan's thoughts that maybe there could be some casual discussion about, what levers are available for rate increases or rate reductions, obviously, where I'd like to go is to see some significant rate reductions. Are what, the scenarios are how we get there, right? Because my contention is that our rates should be similar to other utilities around the region. Always, in my mind, heard that our rates are our rates because our system is special. And I don't know if I'm willing to kind of go down that road a lot. I would rather see our rates be comparable because, again, I don't want our rates to be totally different than somebody else's for no's. There are, I think, things that the council could do, but that's where the discussion is, I suspect, because some of them are rather painful. There are some taxes and so forth that are on top of the rates that don't have to be there, but you could change them, and how do you do it permanently to make something that makes sense? Because again, you can do all kinds of things, quickly, but they don't stick in my mind. They don't hang out, they're like, oh yeah, that's cute, you're kissing babies. Congratulations. I don't like to kiss babies. I like to do things permanently that makes sense. And structurally, so that the ratepayers can know that they have a decent rate. Because the council could cut rates by 50% for the summer. Guess what you're gonna have to do next year? You're gonna have to 4 times them.
Which I believe is Councilmember Evans passing the buck down the line.
Exactly.
For our future generations.
Yeah.
And for the record, I believe that you're very good at passing the buck to the mayor. I can certainly kiss babies for you.
That's exactly what you're supposed to do, right? That's good.
Mr. Mayor, Sherry.
Yes, hey Sherry. Ms. Ryerson.
Hi. Yep, Sherry works. In response to Councilmember Swatman's suggestion about talking about the water rates at the retreat, I would highly suggest against it only because you've already given FCS your marching orders. I sent an email out prior to FCS starting to all of you, and a few of you responded back as to what you would like to see. So, Councilmember Swatman, your comments and requests were certainly included with FCS's study. So they will come back with those different options that you guys discussed and then give you the option to discuss and see what that does to the rate. So you will have the opportunity, we will have a meeting, we will have a presentation. All of that will come as soon as FCS has the ability to put it together.
Others I've heard the urgency. Or you should.
As we're on the topic of the retreat. Parks plan, just a presentation to give to everyone to show what other communities have, what their costs are, what their amenities are, just so we know what we're looking at as far as a potential budget and what things cost. So that'll be given, staff is already kind of looking it over right now. Has some feedback, so I'll have that before we do it. But if there's any feedback you want to see or anything, I can sure it gets put in there.
Hey, Councilmember Baldwin.
In regards to that, what cities have you been looking into?
Well, I looked at not so much cities, but facilities. So I looked at the Star Center in Tacoma, really nice center. I looked at the Federal Way Community Center, looked at the Maple Valley Multipurpose Field.
Yeah.
I looked at the Lacey Multipurpose Field, Sprinker, down in Spanaway, and the Portland Multipurpose Fields for their softball facility. So that's what I've got so far, is just comparables.
Okay.
So we're discussing the Midtown or the Parks plan, I guess, is older.
Yeah, that's one of the topics on there.
What kind of timeline are we looking at again? Do we have one on what we're doing with that? Because I know we're still talking about doing
This was
bonds and
specifically park funding is
tax.
the discussion, yeah. But funding, you gotta know what the potentials are to know how much is enough.
Sure.
So, but yeah, it's not specific about Midtown. I'm looking at the agenda for that now, but it's just parks, revenues, parks plan.
Sorry, how do we get there?
Yeah.
Well, we'll discuss that at the retreat. Councilmember McClellan.
Yes, so since this is my first rodeo with street,
Then you get to pay the bill, you get to pay the lasagna bill.
what I said pay here was.
Garfield sitting there.
But I'm curious because I saw this as an opportunity. I find it sometimes difficult to, as a council, right? And really make sure that we have a coherent policy on things when there's so many big things, and this is a chance for us to say, here's a couple of priorities, and we can work through. There's a lot of data, and so the city staff's going to take, how much time are they going to take to? They're going to present some material. How long does that usually take? That like an hour or 2 hours? Because the whole retreat is only like
9 a.m. to 4 p.m.
yeah. So like 7 or 8 hours long.
If it's Jason, it'll take 4 hours for his
There's essentially scheduled a few hours for each of those topics that are in the agenda for us to talk about. Typically, I think sometimes we can go off the rails on some stuff, so that's why there's some other stuff and other things to hit. And I want to try and make sure that we hit all of those things, but still have a long, good discussion where everybody can get out what they would like to say and what they think staff should know forward.
Okay.
And that's kind of the thought behind it.
Right, because there's two tough topics on there, parks and the 5-year master plan. Right, and yeah, just want to make sure that we.
Those are separate?
No, it's a 5-year parks master plan.
So one.
Yeah, that was one.
You did two. I was Kelly was like 2.
Oh, so it's just the 5-year parks.
Parks master plan, yeah.
No, it's a 5-year downtown.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
What do we want to happen?
All of this piece down here.
right.
Are we doing the dot thing?
The dots?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm buying them currently. I got my bid for $5 per dot. That's what I'm offering currently. So you can talk to me later.
What,
I'm changing the color of the
Oh,
and just so I know, what is the dot thing?
So we have a list
With
of
those
goals.
exercise over.
We have a list of goals and priorities that are put it up on poster size paper and each council members a handful of dots and they get to rank goals and priorities.
Not darts?
Not darts.
So if there's
Our damage deposit won't cover that.
if there's 5 or 6 dots on one particular subject,
Then that's
and that takes a higher priority for staff.
Oh, okay.
Versus one or two once.
No, that's actually good. Councilmember Watson.
Another question off the dots.
Darts.
Have you come up with any decisions on the historical society? What's going on down there? Any plans yet? What we're doing?
As far as bringing him incorporated
Here
in this
or-
building once the public service center to open, we don't have any specific organization on bringing them, incorporating them into justice. Right, yeah, but that will be done, but I even had a couple departments approach me this week as far as space is concerned right now. So it's under advisement.
You still want them to get forgotten, I mean.
No, not at all. I am, I thoroughly, I love the people. I wish I could actually had time to go to one of those.
Their meetings are very good, by the way.
Right.
New presentation each time. They're excellent.
And they show a lot of passion for the city. I certainly appreciate that. And take care. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, oh, you bet. Okay, are we, I think we're done with open discussion. Unless somebody else has an issue. Okay, let's move on. So we are, now we'll have a review of the council minutes.
We had one correction that Councilperson Ballin brought to my attention, so that it's finally fixed what she told me about.
Okay, good, thank you. And we do have one discussion item that needs action tonight, and that would be the subject that we've talked about for the last workshop and the last meeting, which would be discussion action. AB 2256. Madam Clerk, would you read that for us, please?
This is item D, which is AB 2256, up for discussion and action tonight. The council motion would be to approve 2 part-time term limited senior center delivery drivers.
So moved. Seconded.
Okay, let's have a discussion on it with the intent of actually voting on it. So, Councilman Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've always been in favor of this because we have people that are in need that can't get out, haven't been serviced in the past, that are in some dire straits. And there's been council people talk about going out the community and getting some volunteers from churches. I don't think anyone did that, but I did. I went to Calvary Church and talked to Star down there, and she went to her people. Came back to me today, says the only one Tom that can do it. That's what we talked about. I went to Thad Huff, and to Rachel sent me a letter of what she would need, what the requirements of what she really wants to do. That is then going out to the local churches to see if they can participate in a way. As of right now, no one has come back. So that's going to be the biggest problem, is just need to find someone who's going to do that, who's going to volunteer on a regular basis.
And my question with that, Councilman Watson, is what you're saying about Sue's concern is potential background checks that will have to be done for the workshop. Okay.
So that's why I think, as I have in the past, we should go and approve this. Might be a challenge to find someone to hire to do it for it, but in the background check, hire someone, so these people that need this daily hot food will be taken care of.
Okay, do we have any further discussion, Councilmember Fullerton? And then Councilmember Baldwin.
Yeah, I did speak with the pastor, well, I think Kelly spoke with the pastor at our church, Motion Church in Bonney Lake. And I spoke with Saul Hardin, who is in charge of the volunteers. They said that they would definitely be willing to put that on their volunteer services, volunteers. They do need to have kind of what the expectations are. I told him, I said, well, I'd like to get at least 100 volunteers, so that way we know that we've got it covered, but 30 would be great, because then we just one per day. So he said he would need Sue's contact information and a little half-page flyer on what to expect and how they could just sign up and put their names. Because I think if we hire somebody, we're still going to need a background check. It's going to be considered a paid volunteer. So I liked that idea that we could possibly get, 25 people or something from our church.
I can send you Sue's letter.
Okay, yeah, because I don't have that, so that would be great, and then I can send a copy of it to him, and they can put that on their volunteer page at the church as well.
Okay, Councilmember,
Councilmember.
or Councilmember Ball first.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, strangely, Councilmember Lawson, as I was calling people, they had heard from you. So yeah, thank you. And so in my conversation with the pastor of Open Life, he had mentioned that they actually do have access to a very large volunteer database because of some events, some large events that they do in a year. And so, but he did tell me that a week is not enough time. And so he had asked me, well, what particular information did? And I said, well, even if we can get, even if we can find out who is interested in volunteering to do something like this, explaining to him what the job is. And I did even explain that the best case scenario would be to have about 40 volunteers, so two people were volunteering, per day. But he had mentioned that, or I had told him that the name and email, basically just their contact information along with the phone number, would be the beginning process. I know that the vote right now is to consider, how long is this going for? I know it has a sunset clause, but I feel like it's 2 years. Yeah, I think, okay, yeah, the reason why I'm having a difficult time with accepting this right now is I feel like in the next month, we really could conjure up a large amount of volunteers. There just isn't enough time, and then all of a sudden there's going to be, this thing put in place for 2 years. And so if volunteers are coming forward to then do this, which I have confidence that there will be, I just don't know that there has been enough time to look for those volunteers. I feel like I could agree to a shorter period of time to fill in the gap before volunteers actually are able to do it and come forward and get background check. The other thing so I had a question for Councilmember McClymonds is you had mentioned that, because we also don't want to burden Sue with having to organize the volunteers, and so that was something that you had mentioned, getting another organization as a part of a service project or a project that they do to organize the volunteers. So I don't know, those are just my thoughts. And I also contacted Calvary Community Church, and a person did get back to me. I don't know that they could conjure up as many volunteers, right. But Open Life, definitely my conversations with him, he said we really have access to quite a large database. Yeah.
And, I'm sorry, Councilmember Evans.
I think many volunteers is great, but we also have to look at the redundancy of the training. If we have 4 people that alternate 2 a day and they alternate every other week, they're going to know the routes, they're going to know what to pick up, they're going to get to know the people. Part of this is, like what the food bank does, is it's not just dropping off, it's not DoorDash, you're not knocking on the door and putting food on the front porch and walking away. You're actually talking with them, you're recognizing, hey, do you have medications? Do you have a clean dish to eat this with? These are things that a staffed person is going to recognize day in and day out. A volunteer may not catch that. And it's great that they're willing to drop off the food, but it's about the care of the senior as well, and making sure that they have all their needs fulfilled beyond just that hot meal. So it's imperative that, a paid person in that role gets to do that with everyone. They're going to ask about the medications. Do you have all the toiletries you need? Is there anything going on that, I need to know about? Or, they're not a social worker, but they're there and they're caring, and that's, and the volunteer would do that too. However, an inconsistent or not a new face every day doesn't build the trust in that relationship that seems over time to make sure that their needs are fulfilled.
Thank you, Councilmember Ball.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I just don't know that a staffed person making minimum wage, I don't know. I hear what you're saying, that a consistent person in that position is going to make sure that, they're going to show care and concern. I just feel that volunteers, I don't know, when people come forward and step forward to do something that they're not being paid to do, I feel like there's there's kind of a different heart involved in that. But I don't know, that could just be an assumption.
Now,
Yeah, mine was just the number I mean, if it was 2 volunteers every day for 5 days, 2 weeks, and then they rotate in and out, but to just have a new person there every day, to me, that just seems more burdensome to Sue and her staff trying to make sure that this goes to Charlie, this doesn't go to Sam. Sam's is very special. He doesn't eat meat for religious reason, and making sure that you just get that consistency there. And the more I get to know someone, the more I open up to them. So if it's a consistent same volunteer, you get that same relationship. But I think a new face every day really hinders that relationship to add that next level of service.
Yeah, well, maybe the amount of volunteers needs to be less than what I had suggested.
I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor.
I was just going to add to what you guys are talking about here as far as volunteers. I've been involved in a number of volunteer. One of the percentages is 10% of the people typically do 90% of the work. So you may get 14 volunteers, but you have 2 or 3 that typically are the ones that are always there doing stuff and will show up constantly. So just.
And the concern that I had is actually within the structure of the action item that we have to vote on here to address Councilmember Baldwin's concern with this, that if the council were to approve this measure tonight, and we were to go forward and hire 2 part-time term limited senior volunteers, would that obligate the council hypothetically all the way through 2024, or is this a measure that hypothetically, if we were to find a consistent amount of volunteers, that this is primarily a stopgap measure so that we can help Phil, who is just working his tail off over there, help him out in the short term. And if we can just work on traditional supply, demand, market analysis here, that if we have the supply of volunteers, we don't need the demand of the paid workers. So is it that if we approve this, that we're obligated to pay all the way through the 2 years, or is this something that we're just doing as a temporary measure? Councilmember McClellan. Councilmember Watson.
Thank you. Right now, Sue and her staff work long hours. Sue's in the kitchen half the time taking care of the food, and trying to train someone will be very challenging right now. Again, to have someone hired temporarily for the 1.5 to 2 years or so, it is prior I'm going, and then working with the churches carefully to get someone who could be trained volunteers to do this in the future. Right. This is not being paid. The government's paying for this for us to do the money we've been given to us. So it's not coming out of our current budget as ourselves. So this is not going to hurt us at all. And then as we roll into the next year, the churches, open like church, can get together with someone in charge of it, knows our program, has gone around, and can train, get some background checks done for these on a regular basis. I'm trying to ask Sue and her staff to get people on the ground running right now. They can't handle that, guys. Trust me. Sue's right here. You can ask her when she and I talk on the phone, along with the letter I requested what she needs. There's a lot going on down there. I think this would be the easy way to solve the problem temporarily, and then change it later on for us in the future.
And Councilmember Lyons.
Yeah, I'd like to deal with a couple of topics here. One is the topic of the specificity of the agenda bill. We don't really have any parameters by which we screen the people who are receiving this. So I can just call up and say, please deliver food, right? Whether there's a need there or not, it's just, is it convenient or is it needed? And then is it a welfare check? Yes or no? So, this is exactly the kind of thing that I want to try to understand and do of legislating so that we when we institute something like this, that it's very clear what the parameters are to be given this service and what this service provides. Right now, we say it's a driver for 2 years. That's very vague, And already, Council Member Evans is turning it into a welfare check. And that sort of scope increase is exactly what makes me hesitant to support this without some specificity in the bill, right? So I think I could definitely understand taking the ARPA funds, right? Which is my money, by the way, they took it from me before they gave it to you. So you're welcome. Not really. I guess I'm bitter. But anyway, I think we can do a better job with that money. But anyway, so the real point here is that the bill is it's well-meaning and it's good. But I'm not sure I understand. I'm concerned now that we're seeing scope creep in this. And, it would be good to have a very specific sunset clause and very specific details on what's there. So if it's a driver position and that's what it is, then it's a driver. So scope creep and the specificity of the bill concern me. Second thing is the training requirement. That's there. If you hire somebody, you got to train, right? So the first thing you do when you get your first people is they're going to have to be able to train the people. That's going to be there. My big concern, and I did spend some time, I did talk to some people in the community at churches. I talked to the Boy Scouts about was there a capacity or a desire for them to try to be, because managing the volunteers, how did that work? And that's a great leadership opportunity for Eagle Scouts for their community service project. And they thought so as well, because now instead of managing 2 employees, you may be trying to manage volunteers, right? And that's probably an unfair burden on Sue. And but so we have to get a background check, and then they have to ride to learn the routes, right? So yeah, that burden's there, but that burden's there anyway because they don't have anybody now. So we're going to hire 2 people, so we're going to have to train 2 people. Or are we going to train 2 drivers, or are we going to train 2 volunteers, right? So, looking at this whole thing, I could support it if it was, had some more specificity on the roles, or that there were some safeguards in there to make sure that the people who get this service have some sort of vetting, right, that they're really in need. And 2, that the sunset would be definitely tied to the ARPA funds, right, which is in there currently. So that's where I'm at. Things like this concern me because I don't see an end to them. And if there's not going to be an end to it, then I think we should do very diligent about how we're standing up a program that we're going to want to be able to be sure that we can not only fund it, but we can manage it going forward. Thank you.
One question, Councilmember McClymons, if you don't mind. You were talking about your concerns at the beginning of what you're talking about. What the specific concerns that you're talking about, would that be such as city liability, or what precisely are the concerns that you have if the bill is going to be approved? Would that be and I'm just thinking about this from how we would structure either the contract or the application, or how we would do that.
It would be the application. So as a driver, follow the route, deliver the meals. Do they have to have contact with the individual, or can they leave the meal in a designation? What are the instructions? Do they need to do dietary checks? Do they need to do welfare checks? I mean, those are the things that I'm kind of concerned about. They're not bad things to do, but that's additional. Are the drivers also going to have to be Red Cross certified? Have a first aid card, those sorts of things.
Okay. And Councilmember Poole.
Yeah, I was wondering, can it be for 1 year instead of 2? I just know, like, the ARPA funds are not going to be around forever to start a program that's going to be dependent, that we're gonna want to continue forever and ever, you know, is there a stop time? Or is this something that if I vote on this, I'm gonna be passing this down to the next council and the next council and the next council, you know, where who wants to be the person to stop this service, you know?
Ms. Silver, would you address us on some of the concerns like what Councilmember McClymonds and Councilmember Fulton were asking? And when, it's like, I'm a little wondering about that myself. Who came up with the sunset clause and it being 2 years? And all of that, the structure of what we're doing.
I'm not sure what you mean by sunset clause.
That would mean that there is a limitation on how long we're going to provide the funds.
Yeah, it's ending in 2 years with the ARPA funds, I believe.
End of 2024, 2023.
12/31/2023, and it's tied that the sentence reads, the senior center requests 2 part-time positions for delivery staff. These positions would be term limited using funding through 12/30.
Okay.
I believe Chuck came up with that. We discussed that, with the intent on adding it to the budget after those funds were no longer available. I don't plan on ending this program ever, because these seniors, these citizens will always be out there.
Right.
This program, as you all know, was developed during COVID. And we did not have a screening process because they all needed help. No, they were being told to stay home regardless of their situation. We now are developing a screening process for those who call in now and need help. And that's what Councilmember McClymonds was speaking of, is there is no screening process. There isn't a screening process, but we are developing it now. As far as welfare checks, it's just the nature of the beast. Whether you volunteer or you're paid, if you're visiting a senior center or a senior citizen on a daily basis, every other day, once a week, you become a caregiver of sorts. You do a welfare check. You become connected with that person. And, Phil does it all the time. I do it. We just do it because we are connected to that person. Our volunteer driver that's been delivering meals for 2 years knows more about the people that he delivers to than most of their family members. It's not a requirement by any means, but he has those connections.
Well, and last week I was wondering how we were actually providing this service right now, since the council's been deliberating on this matter for a couple, 3 weeks. And I understand Phil is not doing this all by himself, but I was told that there were certain staff members that were actually trying to fill in the gap and doing this.
We're doing everything we can.
Yeah, how many staff members are involved here in trying to get these?
There's three staff members, 2 that work in the kitchen. So when they're delivering, we're short in the kitchen. I mean, it's robbing Peter to pay Paul.
So we, fair to me to say that this needs to be.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Got a question?
Yes. Okay, Deputy Mayor Carter.
It's not, go ahead, it's okay, it's more of a statement. Thank you for explaining that. I've been back and forth with this whole issue the whole time, and definitely, I was for it and definitely against it. My issue with it is that, what is government's job? And it's to provide, a safe place to be, and for fire, police, that kind of stuff, water, sewer, that kind of stuff. I get that everybody has a great heart, and thank you for that. When I volunteer with food bank and I make deliveries, I get to know some of those people as well. But I think that's the appropriate place to do that. It's not government's job to provide a hot meal for citizens. So that sucks to say that, sorry. I know people aren't gonna like it, but quite frankly, we're taking money from our citizens to now make a hot meal for citizens. We want to do that. That's the church's job. That's volunteers' jobs, 501(c)(3)C's jobs. It's definitely a job that's out there, but it's not government's. That's all I say.
And not to be too argumentative with that point, Deputy Mayor Carter, but if you read the preamble to our U.S. Constitution, I believe and it does contradict what you're saying about government stuff in talking about the welfare that come along.
Okay,
Do read it,
Center.
yeah.
Okay, so then my question would be, where does it stop?
Okay, well, are we ready to put this to a vote?
Just want to make sure that's the way the senior center, give seniors that need some support. We are feeding them right now. We're not going to stop doing that. This is a temporary, special thing. Hopefully won't be in the future. So aside from that, this is our job to care of our citizens.
I get that, and COVID and starting up a new program, and just exactly what you said, and what Sue said, is that it's not going to stop. It's going to keep going. And that's my problem.
Okay. Councilmember Climens.
Yeah, just, so I don't believe the community is in dire straits. There's lots of, if there's true emergencies out there, there's lots of organizations that are dealing with that true emergency. There's a lot of resources in Pierce County alone. And so then we really first have to ask what is the role? Two, if we decide this is a valid role for our local government, do we have it well enough to find it, right? And I'm not quite sure it's well enough to find currently, as I hear Councilmember Watson saying this probably isn't a long term, but I don't see how you stop it. And I know that once you create this, the staff will find it hard to stop it. It's going to be hard, and you're going to ask staff to tell people no.
Councilmember Paul.
Yeah, I think regardless on how this is voted on tonight, like seniors do need to be taken care of. And so I know that there are going to be council members that are going to still continue to get connections with volunteers. And I don't want to lose momentum in that if there are volunteers that do step forward for, long term. And again, it doesn't have to be a lot of, then. And honestly, the senior center probably needs more than just drivers, right? There's probably other opportunities for volunteering, and people need to step forward and do that. I talked to multiple people, they have not even heard that there is a need there. And there is. So.
Oh, absolutely. And I does need to find out exactly what's going on. Many generous parts of it. Now, Ms. Hilbert, did you want to address?
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not this bill passes tonight, I invite all of you to ride along with one of the delivery drivers. Just see who we're delivering to and see the situations that we see. I welcome any of you to ride along.
Okay, are we ready to put the matter to a vote? Hearing no objection to AB 2256, a motion of the City Council of the City of Bonney Lake, Pierce County, Washington, to approve 2 part-time term-limited senior center delivery drivers. I'll say aye.
Aye.
And who's opposed?
Nay.
Okay, and without getting into, especially since we're in a roll call position, we did have a silent member who that would be deemed an aye vote. And I believe I heard 3 nay votes. Is that accurate, or were there 4 nay votes?
Do a roll call.
Okay, let's do a roll call. Okay, if we're all in agreement on doing a roll call, Councilmember Watson, go down the board.
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Swami.
Yeah, I haven't contributed to this. I check with the extension currently because, and I have to explain an extension correctly.
Right.
There you go. So, everybody agrees that the service needs to be done. It's a concept of how we do it. So that's why I'm like trapped behind this. Can't we figure out how to do this? Because like Councilmember Watson and several others have pointed out, the need is there. As society changes, and even Mayor, I think, correctly pointed out that, we're judged by how we care for our less. Everybody, nobody is saying don't feed the seniors, right? It's a question of, well, we need, has society changed so that this needs to be, how do we do it? So that's why I'm trapped, because I'm not gonna say, well, yeah, because I'm in complete agreement with several other council members possibly that the government shouldn't necessarily be the first person to go do this, right? But it needs to be done. So, and we're kind of split, right? That's why I'm sitting here trying to think. Put on both sides, yeah, I agree completely with Councilmember Baldwin. It's kind of like, how do we get to yes on this as a government type of thing? So that's why I hope that if my abstention, does that make it go one way or the other? And see, I'm trying to get to how do we get it? I don't want the council to come out and be, oh, council votes no on feeding seniors. Great. That's not what the message.
Well, in that regard, Councilmember Sloman, instead of it being, I think we kind of force you to say that you were abstaining on this, and I don't think that that's really a true abstention. And I know that sometimes your practice is not to vote either way, and we can count it as an aye. Sure. Which is your preference on that? I mean, if you want to make a true abstention, you certainly can.
Sure.
If you want to just
2-1-4.
Yeah.
Say that 2-1-4.
But where does that put?
Isn't it, I think we're wondering, is an abstention a yes?
Yeah.
No, it's not a yes.
Right.
An abstention is nothing, so it doesn't count toward the vote. If you're silent, it's counted as a yes.
Right.
So,
And that's what I was
Mr. Mayor, maybe you could have the aye votes raise their hands.
All right, thank you. Yes. All right. The aye votes raise their hands. Raise their hands. Okay, we have aye votes, nays. We have 4 nays. So because we have 4 nays and we have 1 abstention on the matter, this matter has been opposed and it is not passed.
This.
Do we have an idea, Mr. Mayor, of what the actions are moving forward on this matter? Because like I was mentioning, I don't like to see the program go away.
Oh, I understand. And believe me, I'll be questioning that before we get find out where we go from here. And I would love to have updated information on any of the volunteers that y'all have worked very hard to try to get together and provide. That would be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And what I was thinking, I was hoping for more time again, but I was thinking, if we can't get the volunteers that we need in order to cover the shifts, then, my mind could be changed. But I just, at this point, I just feel like I did not have enough time to make this decision, and I'm not comfortable spending future council money or putting it on the budget for a future council at this point, unless I know that there's absolutely 0 volunteers available. And I absolutely agree that this is a need, and I feel terrible. So I want to cry.
Well, the more data we have on the volunteer effort, the
Yes.
people we can expect to actually volunteer so that we can get the vetting process done would be much appreciated.
Just going to solve the problem tomorrow.
Right.
Because staff is overworked right now.
Right.
They've got a problem. As a council, we said, no, we're not going to help you. So you've got people that are getting fed, and because some people want to wait for a while longer, we've talked this thing to death. And we've got a small problem for a couple of years to take care of from now until students get figured out, get volunteers, and we all as a council voted no for that. I think that's wrong.
No, I understand, Councilmember Watson. Councilmember Baldwin.
We were voting on a 2-year program for that.
Right.
And so I have to disagree with you wholeheartedly. It was a 2-year, it was not just an immediate short-term thing. We were talking about 2 whole years instead of trying to conjure up volunteers. And I have went online to look and see, how do people know that this was a need? And I looked and I looked, and I saw it in one spot. And there is a way for more people to know. So I disagree with you.
Councilmember, I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor. I would also disagree in that it was a 2-year deal on here, but it's been said by 2 people here that it was gonna continue. So it was basically a program that's being stood up.
Okay, and Councilmember Evans.
Why are we discussing this? We took a vote. It's done.
Yeah.
Very important.
Let's move on.
We all have our own opinion about it.
Okay. Next, we have a discussion on the assembly in Midtown. Council, the floor is yours. Councilmember Baldwin.
Yeah, I just want to know more information as to why this code was put in place and what the reasonings were behind it.
And Councilmember Fullerton.
Yeah, I would like to see if there's a way to remove the code.
Remove the code.
Maybe we're talking about an ad, because my understanding that there was some assembly use may be appropriate or being excluded because you can only do it overall, but it's a very technical thing. Maybe take input from whoever to understand the legal complexity of the issue.
Okay. We have any further discussion on that?
What, Jason, what's the section in the code that has the matrix that shows the zoning? That matrix is in there?
Chapter 1802.
Thank you.
The removal of all the assembly nonprofit uses done in March of 2020. Council in order to protect 3% of the city's geographical area, that provides 64% of the city's job base and a substantial percentage of its tax revenue, which in 2021 for retail sales tax was nearly $1 billion. So the former council's decision, well, yeah, I guess in 2021 was that area needed to be protected at 3% of the land, protected consistent with the plans that
Yeah, but you're saying it's a 3% geographical area only in Midtown?
Yeah, so the Midtown, I went back to the staff report that we had prepared for the ordinance.
Midtown represents 3% of Bonney Lake.
Yes, so the Midtown zoning classification represented 3% of the city's geographical area, but represented 64% of its job base. So 3% of the city's overall area has been kind of restricted to commercial job generating uses. And as I said, that represented 64% of our total, the city's total employment and the majority of the city's sales tax revenue. Which was, I don't have a percentage because we can't get down to that level, but that's where all the big boxes are. That's where all the stores are.
Right.
And that was consistent with the adopted centers plan. And centers plan that was adopted by council.
Now, would that be 64% of the city's revenue or
64% of the city's jobs?
Jobs.
So
Okay.
of the people who are employed within the city of Bonney Lake, geographically, 64%. Well, in 2021, when it passed, worked in.
What are the assembly uses that are permitted currently?
Pretty much every zone except for Midtown.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, we're talking over the people who are actually raising their hands. Councilmember Baldwin.
I know you're saying it's 64% of the job base here that in Bonney Lake, so basically, in other words, where the jobs are if you want to come to Bonney Lake to work. But is it fair to say that the majority of Bonney Lake residents don't work in Bonney Lake?
I believe it was there's the majority of Bonney Lake residents do commute out. A lot of our people who work in the city do commute in because most of the jobs in Midtown are service center jobs. And because, and most of them, when we looked at this in the last comp plan update, lived around the Prairie Ridge area and that area.
Councilmember Fullerton.
Well, then,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sure she's probably still completing your question.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that because the majority of the jobs that I'm seeing there are entry-level jobs, like entry-level jobs that are offered in Midtown, other than maybe some small businesses, but really in Bonney Lake, let's be honest, we have many box stores and not really small mom and pop businesses. So I guess my question is, I'm not seeing what the need is for that code anymore.
That, like I said, that was a policy decision. The policy decision before when this council adopted the center's plan was to preserve and protect Midtown, and that's why when the ordinance came forward in 2021, it was unanimously adopted by the council last year. To protect that 3% for both jobs and subsection.
And
But that, the council's policy decision.
Okay, well, I know of a pastor that's been trying to purchase land and build a church in Bonney Lake for at least 5 or 6 years, and was told that it's against the law to have a church on the 410 or in Bonney Lake or in that area. So is that a code or a policy that was adopted before 2021?
So, the original Midtown zoning code was adopted, I don't know, it was before my time, so before 2012. And that had a number, it didn't allow for churches and a number of uses. When we went through a review of that code in late 2019, we realized that the code was not consistent with the Religious Persons Act, which requires you to treat all assembly nonprofit uses similarly. So we amended the code in 2021 to remove all of the other similarly situated uses so that we were consistent. But the rule of not allowing churches in Midtown has been on the books before 2012, because it was when I got here. Councilmember Evans.
Can you remind us all, where does Midtown start and end, both east to west and north to south?
So Midtown starts, the Midtown zoning starts about 192nd, right when you cross the bridge, and goes all the way out to 214th. And it's basically the parcels that front 410. The only section where you might have deeper parcels is in the Walmart Fred Meyer complex because of where they got stuff. There is a church on 410 in downtown, the Elcom Church, and they're over here. And I know when we did the Midtown East Town zoning district, we allowed churches to remain in the civil uses to remain in the East Town.
Is the church still in existence, one above the Goodwill, right by Dan Franklin?
I believe that one moved over, over here.
Okay. Oh, so, gotcha. Okay. The question I have, I'm sorry, Councilmember Bonney.
Yeah, I think, I just have a problem with the coding in general, not just specifically to churches, but just that a nonprofit style organization, things that fall under that umbrella, if they have the money to purchase a property, that they can't in a designated area. And so I just wonder if the council is willing to reconsider this code and to have it removed.
And which the follow-up that I have to this is that the agenda is a bit vague as to what we're exactly doing on this issue here at the workshop. It sounds like it would be an appropriate topic to put on the community development committee or one of our committees.
Well, I didn't think, Mr. Mayor, if I could fill you in a little bit.
Yeah.
Anyways, so I know that Councilmember I discussed a little bit with, and I suggested that we, discuss it at a workshop to see if there was support for the full council, right? So that it wasn't just a small idea between a couple council members or anything, that, the full council would say, yeah, that's a great idea, let's move forward with that, because it does take a lot of staff time to make that effort. So I think that was the effort, was to try to get a consensus or a feel from the full council on whether they said, okay, yeah, go to the public safety, CDC, whatever, put it on the planning commission, future planning. So I don't know if there's support behind that, or if there's more input that the council needed to know. Mr. Sullivan was pretty good about laying out some of the figures, but maybe there's some more information or something that the council needs in order to make a better recommendation for this. It is, I understand, quite the process. It's not just something that we can change overnight. We'd have to go back through possibly the planning commission or something like that. Yes.
Probably
all
that,
kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah, it wouldn't be removing the code, it would be adding things to the permitted use.
and Councilmember Evans actually.
Yeah. Could I ask a technical question too? Of interest in the conversation, just for a conversation, I was kind of wondering if somebody has a space and they say, well, in some of the churches, other people's space, right, for us. That's, I guess, yeah. I gather they could do that today in that kind of, like, hey, I own my building, why don't you all come over and have service? That kind of thing is probably okay. It's not like we're not gonna send the police over there and tell them to get out of that building. We're talking about a permanent type of a use where
We're talking about, we're only dealing with things when we.
so it has to be permanent.
Yeah, so if somebody is just
Casual,
or meeting, meeting at for whatever purpose, meeting at the theater,
yeah, because it's not a permit, it's what it is permitted, okay.
we give them permitted activity, but so.
Like that shoreline thing we were talking about.
And I'm going to go out on the bit of a limb again in mentioning this, but when this issue was discussed back in 2021 and asked, did we do any sort of research on the impact of the First Amendment right to assemble?
Right, that's what drove the whole 2021 amendment package. So what had happened was I'm just trying to explain the council's decisions at the time. Right. You're not vested toward any decisions. This is just kind of history of what the decisions were made. So the previous city council back in 2012, when they adopted the Midtown zone, they removed churches and a number of uses from the permitted use. Kathleen and I talked around 2019, 2017 and reviewed our land use. And at that time, we had a decision to make. One decision was to add those uses back. The other was to remove similar situated uses. So we are consistent with the federal law, which is the Religious Institutional Persons Act, which is how churches are kind of regulated to make sure you're not infringing on. And that drove us to remove additional uses so that we were consistent. Before we weren't, because we didn't have all of the goal. There were some things on the permitted uses matrix like museum, the movie theater got removed. So any of those types of similarly situated uses were also removed because the council's decision was they wanted to maintain that focus in 2021. They wanted to maintain that focus on Midtown as a commercial.
And just as a follow-up to make it part of public record, Ms. Haggard, you're satisfied with the research that was done back in 2021?
Yeah, and we're not really talking a constitutional issue, it's a federal statute called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. Yeah, it's quite a complicated title, but what this is that when you're zoning for land uses, you have to treat similarly situated religious and non-religious land uses similarly. So functionally, a public meeting hall or a museum, same as a religious institution like a synagogue. And so for zoning purposes, you have to treat them the same. But the council was really focused on wanting to have Midtown as an economic and a revenue generator. And so their desire at the time was to pull out uses that aren't tax generating, and that includes housing, it includes public services, it includes as well as assemblies. So it wasn't just a focus on these religious or on the assemblies. The focus was really on any use that isn't an economic factor.
Okay.
But it is a policy decision, so if the council now wants to and have us add uses back in, we can certainly do that. What you can't do is you can't add non-religious assembly uses back in and not add religious. But you can do the opposite.
I see. Now, given the information that we had before the council tonight on the workshop, is everybody satisfied that they can successfully move to put this on that this is an issue that should be discussed in committee or the planning commission. At this point, Councilmember McClung.
So I would just like to go and to clarify that, what, Council Haggerty and, Jason, pointed out that the vote on that was my understanding was that we had the centers plan that had identified Midtown as an economic center. And when you look at what Midtown is doing, that made sense. I gotta say, I really didn't understand, how that land use matrix worked 100% at that time, but I understood the principle, and I seem to remember questioning the theater. I'm like, wait, if we're an assembly, how can we do that with the theater? And I was told that it would be because it's already there. But so with that, I think, for me, I don't know about the whole council at that point in time, but at that point in time, my understanding is that we had a plan manifested in the center's plan that said this is what the plan for that part of the city was, and we were bringing the zoning to match that plan. So the question I have, the reason I go through all this is the question I have is that if we direct if we request the planning commission to consider a change to the zoning, does that mean we also need to update our center's plan?
Which again, I believe is an issue why this should be going to either a commission or the committee to discuss. And I think that's probably why we had it on the agenda.
Large and broad, they're myopic. And so I know the policies talk about reserving the land, but how that's done in capacity, I don't know.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Councilmember Watson.
The biggest problem we talked about is our land areas, just like new homes being developed. We have very few spots in our city to get this revenue to help our infrastructure develop. Because we have no new homes going there, that's getting limited. The retail sales space in our city is very limited down 410. So we talked at the time, there's plenty of spaces offside of 410 for churches to go. I know we had one that's been wanting to go there for a long time off 410. But for us to have more retail spaces and restaurants on 410, for us to get more revenue, as we keep growing, we need money to help pay for what we're doing in our city. And that's what's generated from retail stores, not from other groups such as churches or things like that. That's what we're trying to keep in one spot of our city to make it revenue based. That was our thought process all the time, because we are such a small main part of our city. More of those spaces away from our main retail corridor, it's going to have more challenges trying to keep our expenses for other things.
Okay, Councilmember Evans.
Jason, did you say it was 3% or 6%?
It's 3%. So the area that's zoned.
Okay.
There's more to the Midtown Center, but there's other zone classifications.
Right.
The area, the properties that are zoned Midtown, we did the analysis back about 3% of the city's total land.
I know we had this discussion based on religious facilities and others at that time. And, there's 97% of the other city limit areas that can be done. And there was never an intent to exclude this as the priority. It was, like Kathleen said, the basis was on an economic stability and basis for that 3% of that area. It wasn't a council decision to exclude churches and say no. It was that was the byproduct of the economic side of things being the driving factor there, not excluding church organizations or Little League couldn't set up a organization there next to Lamp Post if wanted to based on that permitted use thing. So because of that all falls under that nonprofit church religious facility. So that wasn't, as much as that's probably the driving factor in the question now, that wasn't the driving factor in the exclusion of it.
And Councilmember Clemens.
Would that be a case where a variance would be appropriate?
No, that would be restoring a special privilege. That would be, it's applying a special privilege that not everybody's entitled to. The one suggestion that did come up in 2017, when this issue came up, is that any property owner can request a comprehensive plan amendment to change their zoning. Every other zoning classification in the city does allow for uses. So any property owner could submit that comprehensive plan amendment application to change both their comprehensive plan designation and use designation. They would have to show how it's consistent with the comprehensive plan as an overall strategy and ultimately approved by the city council. It's not a quick process, but it is a process where those individual votes could occur through that policy.
That goes through the planning commission as well.
Since it's a comprehensive plan designation changing, yes, it would go through public hearing with the planning commission. Planning commission would then make a recommendation to the council, and the city council would ultimately vote on both the comp plan designation change and zoning classification.
Councilmember Baldwin.
So these designated nonprofits, for example, they could also post up shop or build or buy whatever in the Easttown area as well?
That was when we did the Easttown zoning district. Previously was not permitted in. There was a lot of discussion at that council meeting and ultimately added in. So the only zone in the city that does not allow for these kind of larger assembly line uses, nonprofits, is Midtown. Every zone does now allow for it, either as a conditional use permit or as a outright.
And I hate talking over people. My apologies for that. But how much empty space do we have in the warehouses underneath? What do we have that's filled and what do we have?
I think everything over there built is pretty much holding it out. I mean, there might be one or two spaces, but in my conversation with Chris Lear in his building just a couple of weeks ago, he says they're actually having tenants out that they sublease to because they got so big. Wow. Carlisle took the other building. I think some of these projects all full. So we are expecting more buildings to be built out there. We don't know what those buildings are going to be, how they're going to perform, but there could be. But at this point, I think we're pretty full out.
Do we have any interest on the property where the butter biscuit used
It's going to Carlisle.
Okay.
At least that's what the permits are in for.
Okay. Whether
it comes to fruition, I don't know. But yes, they have submitted permits.
Okay, I believe. Oh, Councilmember Ball.
I have the same question then for Midtown. As far as businesses, is it mainly full, or are there areas that are for sale that people are wanting to purchase?
I know that there are some vacant properties out there in the Wisconsin development. That one's a unique area because it's under the development agreement until 2024, which has a whole different zone. So that one's kind of weird. I think most of the properties in Midtown are developed with something or have permits on them.
Okay, and if this does go to the planning commission, if we were to decide something like that, they're going to be deciding it based on, are they just coming forward with recommendations for the council, or are they making decisions based on? Okay.
Yeah, they would hold a public hearing, take testimony, and then make a recommendation. One way or the other. It's a non-binding recommendation.
So do we have a consensus to have this go to the planning
Planning commissioner, would go back to the CDC.
It's the council's prerogative on that. We're all here, the CDC members agree with whatever the council wants. I don't know what we would do at CDC level with it, other than gather more information. If the council wanted some more information on it. Further, this, I would think that maybe tonight isn't the best night to make this decision, right? Because you are putting a lot of work. If you say, yeah, that's great, let's let the planning commission work on it, there's a lot of work and staff time involved in that part of the government, process. Maybe,
Is it one of the working things for them to gather that information?
Yeah,
Are they part of
right,
the investigative process with it?
Yeah, but it's my understanding that, there's a lot of staff time that goes into report to the planning. It's not a trivial thing, just.
If I'm not mistaken, it'd have to be an amendment of the planning commission that we've already.
Yeah, I understand.
That would be.
Okay. So,
I don't know where.
what does the council want to do with this?
I don't know where everybody's kind of thinking. Should we go to the next workshop and say, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we're all on the same page. Let's make sure to put. I don't know how the flow works.
5 of the 7 of us were here a year ago when we made that vote.
I don't, but we could, it's a council prerogative. Maybe we have different information, a different set of situation out there that is. Are you guys, what's the feeling of the council? Is this, do we need
Yeah,
more
I
information?
don't know the feeling of the council. Everybody's.
This is,
faces
this
are
we can't talk
same
about
right
right now.
I would support.
Okay.
Just knowing that it's a long journey and, but it'd be nice to know how much that costs. And to be consistent with cheapskate that I tend to be. How much that costs.
Two part-time food.
Yeah.
Now we're working here, let's go.
Planning commission.
Oh, they're not.
Just want to add to this conversation. We're saying that. Sure.
I think get rid of it, but
We're gonna put a P in the column. Put a P in it. That's what it would take to, and the way I understand it. That's what it would take to make them.
There are probably, I don't know, 20 that fall under this. So I think the question for the council is, would you want staff to slot back code for consideration?
And update the center's plan so that they're consistent, so we don't do this. That's the value of going back through the process is the center's plan and the code will match and all the things.
Is this something that we could put on the agenda for the workshop? I mean, the retreat? That would give,
The budget retreat.
that would
Here's
give
the-
time for the codes to come up that we need to consider. Because it sounds like there's more than one. There's about 20, you said, Kathleen, so.
Like the council directing them. Starting in 2012, they pulled out some uses. 2021, we did a big, we moved it up to 20 uses that included also things like community storage and apartments. So it's, what is the council asking, I guess, I think we're saying, what is the council asking us to put back in the land? The process of putting things back in the land use matrix is we hold a public hearing with the planning commission makes a recommendation. that comes to the city council. Policy issues can be dealt with, we'll have to figure that out, but from a land use matrix, the bigger question is, what are we working on? Adding civic, religious, and institutions back in, or are we adding all, I mean, that's, I think, the part that we're struggling with is, we removed all governmental facilities from Midtown. So the FAA couldn't buy property in Midtown and open up a headquarters. So that's I think what we're struggling with is the scope of what the council is.
Okay, Councilmember Paul. And, I'm sorry.
Well, Jason, because you're the expert and we don't know, the list of items, I guess, of organizations that you guys placed in there, is it difficult to get us at least that information as a start? Just to let us know what are the things in that particular code that are not allowed anymore.
So what I would recommend is, Councilmember Climate said 18. I can forward you the council packet from 2021 that has the update where we removed additional uses, we actually highlighted. And that, but if you go back and look at the one from 2021, churches were already where I was. We just cleaned it up and removed a similar situation. As Kathleen had said, our only guiding thing when it comes to the uses is we couldn't add in all of the nonprofit and assembly uses and not add churches in, but we can do the convert. Because, yeah, so we can add religious institutions only and leave all the other nonprofits out, but we can't add all the nonprofits and all those in and they have to be situated.
Okay, yeah.
And Deputy Mayor Carter.
Thank you. I'm just trying to clarify. I think what I have heard as being the issue was that it was the church. That churches aren't allowed on 410, and that's wrong, and we need to allow them to be there. And then that creates some other issues. I think a couple years ago, when we heard last year when through, at least my understanding was that, yeah, it was not necessarily a permitted use, but there was essentially a door that they could go through, right? So it gave them the opportunity to have that meeting and for a council vote. So there was at least a door that they could walk through while keeping the economic engine at Midtown.
Okay, Councilmember Paul.
So just clarification, it's my understanding that you said we can add religious organizations only without having to do other nonprofits. But if we do a nonprofit, then we have to include religious organizations. We can add one.
Assembly.
Assembly, yeah.
So you can have you can have religious assembly uses by itself, add religious assemblies and all other assemblies, so it's an option. Or what you can't do is add all the other assemblies and leave religious.
Okay. And does that answer the questions that you were
Yeah.
looking for tonight?
I think if you could send me that would be great, the 1808 you were talking about.
Yeah, I'll send you a link to 18. It's actually just, if you look at it and you see it's actually, and it just has a bunch of P's and blank spots in it.
Okay, I know I would like to receive that to look at it.
And then I will send you the packet from 2021 that has reference to the policies and everything that was discussed back in 2021. Then more uses were removed.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I believe we have a direction now. So let's move on to our last item tonight, which would be a discussion on the pedestrian and bicycle program grant funding. Mr. Johnstone, the floor is yours.
Okay, I will try and make this as quick as possible. The pedestrian bicycle program has issued its call for projects deadline of May 1st, 2022 for applications. We have finished filling the gaps in for the Funnel Creek Trail further south. Natural progressions, we're looking at phase 3. I know that that's been receiving some public support. I believe you all have been receiving letters from the public. I wanted to come forward and give you a proposal for your consideration. City engineer Woodcock and I have been working together with our consultants, looking at phase 3, and we decided to break it into a phase 3 because we just couldn't leave well enough alone, and we had to do it. But there was some logic behind that. What this does is it basically takes 3A, which really is the more challenging part of the project, and puts it into its own phase, and also takes what is a large project and makes it into something that is maybe slightly more affordable as we tackle and make it into a funding package that may be a little bit more palatable. So, working with our consultants, we've got a planning level cost estimate of about $6.5 million to get from 102nd Avenue, -2, which is currently being there at the end of that segment now, up to Church Lake Road, where it would currently, if we were to complete that, it would end at Church Lake Road at this time. And then we would worry about the next phase of the project, I believe. The issue here that I wanted to make sure that you all understood, and the reason that I want to get your approval before I move forward with applying for this, is that our understanding from our consultants is that traditionally, historically, this particular granting program has issued about $4.5 million out for projects in the past. So per project, we've seen a max award of about $4 to $4.5 million. This project that we're estimating right now is about $6.5 million. So there's a delta there of about $2 million that the city would have to come up with in order to pursue getting this project complete. So with that in mind, if we were to pursue this, you already give your approval tonight, and our application was successful, and we were awarded $4.5 million, we would have to come up with an additional $2 million in order to complete the project as it's currently laid out there. So that was the question in front of you tonight. There is no guarantee by just applying that we're going to be awarded anything. But I did want to present this alternative to you so that you knew exactly what we were up against in considering this, moving this project forward. It is something that is possible, but it would take a significant commitment.
Okay, any discussion or questions? Deputy McCarty. Thank you.
Question, thank you, first of all, for breaking it down to a smaller project. Do that again.
3C?
Yeah. Something less than, say, 4 million, good question, they grant for?
Yeah, Deputy Mayor.
When would the grant be issued?
So through this program, monies are start being made available July 20th.
So, but when is the grant awarded itself?
I have the program open here. Grants are. I think former Councilmember Hamilton is setting it up on the screen there.
Mark, is there a chat box for Mark there?
Good job.
We can't hear you well, we have, Mr.
I believe that the actual award happens in 2020. Funds are actually.
Okay, so for me, we're having a discussion in a few weeks about potential grant funding, or not grant funding, art funding, which has a mechanism that would potentially support this through a councilmatic bond and stuff. So I'm okay applying for it because we're gonna have that discussion still at least 9 months before award and 2 years or a year and a half before even the funds would be received to hopefully backfill that. And even if awarded, we can say no, or we cannot accept it, right?
We can.
That's the goal. I'm just saying if our talks don't go well at the retreat and they no to a bond and no to parks forever, then we withdraw the application.
Yeah, we say never mind all that work.
If we are awarded grant organizations count upon organizations down funds.
Right. Can we withdraw though
before award? Yeah. We couldn't. I've never done it before, but certainly I would think you could.
Yeah, it's nice to have some options there. I don't want to stop from applying for that.
when does the application have to be in?
May 30th.
Oh, so that's after so things that we would be discussing is after the, anyway, so, yeah. Okay, Councilmember Ball.
Brian, I just appreciate you.
Oh,
I
thanks.
really wanted to know that. Thank you for that very clear explanation. Always appreciate it. I have a question, and this is just kind of hypothetical. I'm New York and that's true a little bit thinking about it. So, you guys had a grant, and obviously it went a lot higher than the grant was. And so I guess just, do you feel like the $6.5 million is a pretty increases in cost, and that's where I go, ooh. Yeah.
If there's anything that the last 2 years has taught me is that nothing is guaranteed. We're seeing prices right now on materials absolutely wild. We heard the fire chief earlier talk about the difficulties they're having in procuring materials. I can't guarantee what the cost would do. I feel confident about the number right now.
Okay.
But that's really about the best I can do.
I think the other question I had, and I don't know if you were joking or not, Deputy Mayor Carter, but I know you put so much work into things, so if this is an impossible thing, but I do wonder if there is a way that it can be segmented further down, or is there a way for there to be another grant that can help support, the other part of the gap? Or even once this is complete, does it actually connect to anything? I know this is like a bane in a lot of people's minds, the trail, because it's just kind of in these. So I'm just wondering those things.
Ideally, with these granting organizations, you want to reach a place where you've got kind of a logical end to the thing. And in this case, because we are going through an area that is just open field essentially, if you bring this phase to a shorter conclusion, you're going to be dumping it off in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
And so that's not going to be looked really favorably upon by the granting, or frankly our users.
Yeah.
And so that's why we really want to push through to get to Church Lake. It also gets us past a very challenging segment. If you look at the figure that is in your packet, that segment that is the red dashed line is actually an elevated boardwalk. And we'd really like to be able to get past that in this segment. We've got sensitive areas through there. Regulations are changing all the time. It would be nice to get on that, get it behind us and be done with it.
That's screws as well.
Would be, yeah. So like the pin piles, the things that we've been working with on these previous. Yeah.
But is there possibility for another grant to fill the other part of the space? Money-wise?
Instead of the city coming up with a balance?
Yeah.
In other words, state or county funding through a grant, it's federal grant, let's look at county grant.
It's possible that there could be some other sources out there, and we could maybe look into that. I don't know off the top of my head what is available other than a bike program for this particular type of project.
Trails, so maybe know some.
Yeah,
they got. Right, so again, with that little, the smaller project, isn't there, there isn't a PC you can go after is there only 4-some odd million available for the grant?
No, actually, I mean, we could be awarded more. All I'm doing is kind of going off past history. So there is, I think at state monies, it's 57 million that's available, I think, that's on their,
but this is actually cost us
6.5 roughly.
For some odd reason, we don't think we're gonna get that?
I'm assuming right now that we would not, based on past history.
Is there like it's like, oh, you only get 75% away?
There is no hard and fast rule. No. I'm just right now, I'm looking at past history. If we could get all of it funded, and I would apply for the full value, then great. We get all of it and we continue moving forward.
Also, and I would point out, for clarity, there is, a lot of our trails that we built in the past that did end up fair. I support what you were trying to do to get from point to point, but we've done a lot of that, like, just right in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, I know that has happened. And I do want to make sure the council understands, my intention is to go after the full value of the project, not just what I think.
I would wonder about the section 2, though, how much of this right of way do we own?
So most of this phase of the project would be built on property that belongs to Quashot, and they secured an easement for us through that easement.
So then that's mainly the lower area.
Right.
Well, wait a minute, don't get too happy, Kelly. Isn't that red line that goes up the side of the hill there?
So there is a portion where that red line is at, and we still got to do a little bit of work. Right now, there's some right of way that continue.
So what, we're to put this project forward as a grant and whatnot, what would it be? Is it like cement all the way through type deal, or is it gravel, is it dirt, like what is it?
Yeah, so on the figure, it shows you a couple of cross sections. And I had our parametrics color code the map to reflect the different sections that we would need. So the yellow section corresponds to section B on the drawing, which is a 16-foot wide asphalt trail. And that would be the bulk of it from 192nd, where it would pick up trail users from the end of 2B2, all the way up to the south end of the boardwalk, which would then extend to the north all the way up to Church Lake. So it would be an asphalt trail to the boardwalk.
Which I like, is great, I think we should try to do that. My question though is still, can we break it down? Okay, instead of breaking it down from a certain distance, break it down to, okay, it's gonna be a dirt trail to begin with, and we'll do another grant that will turn into asphalt.
So unfortunately, the condition of the grant is going to require that that trail be built to its full, to that standard. It's a good idea, but yeah, they'll want that thing asphalt from the very beginning.
Yeah, I'm for it though. Councilmember Fulton.
So is this gonna be specifically for, the bike trail? Could it be used towards, like parks as well? Because if you can ask as high as you want, I say ask really, really high, and then we can pave that parking lot and consider it being part of the bike trail, since that's where it's supposed to end.
Yeah, so under this grant, there's two different, there's specific projects that are eligible. And right off of, and they're really clear up top on the all the projects. It's pedestrian and bicyclist safety and or mobility infrastructure improvement. Typically also includes preliminary engineering right away or its development design only projects that result in ready to construct pedestrian or bicycle projects. So it's specifically geared towards. So we would be able to really do like parking lots of parking.
Okay.
Not this time.
Okay, we have people packing up, so we might as well ask the question, which is basically, do we have the council's blessing to allow Mr. Johnstone to apply for this?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Seeing no more business, we are adjourned. Thank you.
I really want that parking.